Welcome back to Diamonds in the Rough. Well, 2 days ago it was Star Wars Day, and because of that, I decided to do one of my favorite and most underrated Star Wars films of all time, Solo. Now, this probably should have come out 2 days ago, and I realized that, but that completely slipped my mind, but since some people dubbed today Revenge of the Sixth, I think I get a free pass here. So, let's dive into Solo. But first, I think we should take a quick look through the rest of the Disney Star Wars films, starting in 2015 with The Force Awakens. You know, for years, this was one of my favorite Star Wars films. In fact, I think when it first came out, it was my favorite Star Wars film. Nowadays, I see the problems. I see that, yeah, it's just kind of a big repeat of A New Hope, even though I've been defending that and saying that it's different. It's the same narrative, but it has a different emotional substance in every scene. So I kind of give that a pass, and also it's like, okay, they're just trying to prove that, hey, we can do Star Wars like the good old days. They're trying to get some positive feedback from the fans now after the prequels disappointed nearly every single one of them. They're trying to get some goodwill back. So, okay, they're trying something different, and the next year, in 2016, we got the first ever spin-off film, not including Clone Wars, because that was technically a TV show pilot, even if it was a theatrical film, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, and man, this has not been more different. Focusing on a very uninteresting group of rebels attempting to steal the Death Star plans. And I like this concept for an anthology film, and I think the film is very well done. In most places. It has some problems. I don't think the pacing is very good. I think with Darth Vader especially, I think his hallway scene is great, but I think that should have been the only time he shows up. He shouldn't have been in any of the marketing. He shouldn't have been in any previous scene, because this would have been one hell of a surprise and would have made the scene 10 times better. Also, like I said, the characters are just not interesting, especially Jyn Erso. She's not an awful character, but she's a passive character, one who just kind of reacts to the situations going on around them. And while they're not inherently bad, they are inherently a lot more boring. So, the characters are my main problem, but the story still has some issues, but overall, I still like Rogue One, even though I'm pretty sure it's the one Star Wars movie that I like, but haven't watched very much. Which brings us to 2017's The Last Jedi. My least favorite Star Wars film, and one of the most disappointing films I have ever sat through. This was other than Fantastic Beasts 2, I don't think I have seen more of a disappointment, at least as far as films I see in cinema. Batman v Superman can be up there too, but I don't know what the hell they were thinking going with this. Rian Johnson did such a horrible job with the writing and direction. The only positive thing I can say is the special effects look good, but that's not really high praise when you have hundreds of millions of Disney dollars being sunk into this film, and the actors try their best, but when you have actors as good as these, they shouldn't have bad performances. But the script and the direction and the horrible action sequences and the stupid characters drag this film down to one of my least favorite films of all time. Not necessarily one of the worst films of all time, but one I personally despise more than a lot of other films. And due to that negative reception, it significantly impacted Solo: A Star Wars Story. I guarantee if you ask a lot of other people, why do you think Solo failed? Most people will point fingers at The Last Jedi, and I think that's fair. Normally, pointing fingers at other films isn't fair. Like, I don't think Rise of Skywalker sucked because of Last Jedi. I don't think pointing the finger at Last Jedi there is fair. Pointing it here, it makes sense, because people were still trying to get the bad taste out of their mouths for Last Jedi, which is why they didn't go see Solo. People will say, oh, no, it's Star Wars fatigue. Oh, it's the release date, moving up the release date. I will say moving up the release date was a pretty stupid decision, especially where they put it. I know May was where the first 6 films premiered, but when you have such stiff competition as Avengers Infinity War and Deadpool 2, you needed to find a different release date. Release it in, like, October or something, or Hell, even give a November release and have it give it a little less competition. Fantastic Beasts 2 wasn't that big of a success anyway, so give it a little less competition. I know it probably would have gotten its ass kicked by Aquaman had it released in December, so that I can understand. Moving the release date, I get, but moving it up so close to Last Jedi doesn't make sense. But I don't think that's why it flopped. Also, saying Star Wars fatigue is not a thing. People go see these movies multiple times. I have seen things on the internet that show that people have gone to films. I've seen reports of people who have gone to rewatch films in the cinema hundreds of times, and I am not kidding. So saying there's Star Wars fatigue is bullshit. People will go see a Star Wars film purely because if people were sick of Star Wars, Rise of Skywalker wouldn't have made over $1 billion. And it's the same people that say, oh, Marvel fatigue's kicking in. And yet in 2019, all 3 of the films ended up breaking $1 billion, and one of them became the highest grossing film of all time. I still consider that because Avatar's win is still bullshit because that's been re-released 4 times. I don't count that. Avengers Endgame still has the win. And you know if they really re-release that, it's going to hit the number 1 spot within 2 days. So that's not the reason. The reason it failed is because Last Jedi sucked. People hated Last Jedi, so they didn't have much faith in this film. Not only that, but this film had some serious behind-the-scenes troubles, with Kathleen Kennedy apparently firing the original directors, what were they, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who, of course, you probably know as the creators of the Lego movies and Into the Spider-Verse, which came out the same year as this, and ended up winning Best Original Animated Film at the Oscars. And I think actually made more money at the box office, but that's not the point. So Ron Howard was brought in. Ron Howard's a great director, and like I said, I think he did very well with this film, but considering almost the entire thing was reshot, and this isn't like, in the 1980s, if a film had trouble behind the scenes, you probably wouldn't even know. You wouldn't know until 20 years later, but considering in the age of the internet, the second a movie starts having behind-the-scenes troubles, you will know about it. That's why people had a lot more faith in Last Jedi, because there weren't any behind-the-scenes troubles. But now we know why, is because there was a director that the dumbass producer could dictate to. Same problem with our government. So, and Phil Lord and Chris Miller aren't going to put up with that bullshit, and I honestly commend them for that. Actually, I'd really like to know what they were originally going to do with this film. But I don't think it's fair to say this film is a bad film when people just wrote it off immediately. I've seen people who really like this film. People I know really like this film. The critics were kind of split on it. I think on the tomato meter it's on 70%, and to be fair, that's pretty average. That's not a bad score. But because it's still higher than Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Rise of Skywalker. But Star Wars, But Star Wars usually has higher percentages. Hell, even Last Jedi, which had a 40-something audience score, got a 90 on the tomato meter, which is absolute horseshit, but whatever. So this film focuses on a young Han Solo, played by Alden Ehrenreich. Perfectly, might I add. He doesn't try to do a Harrison Ford impression, not even a Han Solo impression. He just kind of talks normally, but he has the same kind of tone in his voice, and has the same, facial expressions and movements. I saw a deepfake that put, a young Han Solo's face on there, and it looked almost identical. It looked identical, and that shocked me. So, it shows how perfectly cast this guy was. And with the rest of the cast does very well. There's a new guy in the Chewbacca suit due to Peter Mayhew's death, but that really doesn't mean much. Emilia Clarke does pretty well as Kira. I don't think the character was that necessary, but, well, when you look at the small picture, she doesn't seem that necessary, but she's basically the driving force for Han why Han ends up getting wrapped up in all this. And one of the highlights, most people will say, is Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian. Now, I've seen people complain that he was not as good because he was doing a Lando Calrissian impression. Grow the fuck up. He's doing an impression because he's portraying the character. Grow up. And his impression is pretty spot on. It's not even pretty spot on. It is spot on. It is perfect. Woody Harrelson's always a always a welcome addition, and he does very well here as Tobias Beckett. And this, much like Rogue One, shows the actual... This isn't like a war, this is a small, like, heist movie. I've seen people compare this to, like, an Uncharted in space, and I can definitely buy that. I understand where they're coming from there. And this shows that people, the heroes aren't always gonna make it out alive. Hell, most of them don't. The very first mission that Han goes on, there are about 6 of them, and about half the crew dies. And then later on, we're introduced to the villain, played by the always fun to watch, Paul Bettany, who runs as... what's the guy's name? It was, something. It'll come to me. But he runs Crimson Dawn, which, as many of you know later on, and because of this movie, it's run by Darth Maul. And I do like... One thing I will say is that Bettany's character does make a appearance, like a small appearance in Season 7 of Clone Wars, and I thought that was brilliant. So the plot of this, I already explained, is that Han gets separated from his girlfriend as they're leaving Corellia. And he ends up joining the Imperial Army, and a lot of people complain about the scene where he gets his last name. Now, because a lot of people say, why does he need a new name? Why couldn't Han Solo just been his name? Even as a kid, I never bought for 1 second that Solo was actually his real name. Even as a kid, I'm like, there's no way that's his real name. So I like that he was actually given the name here. I do think it should have been given to him by somebody like Kira, Beckett, or Lando, or even Chewie, instead of this random Imperial guy. So yeah, I don't have a problem with the name, I just don't think it was executed very well. And we get to see, like, some kind of World War I trench battle, and it looks great. Though, the one thing I will say that people have made points on that I kind of understand is the lighting. The lighting in this looks like shit. It is so dark, you can't see... Like, some places it makes sense. Like the World War I homage, where they're, like, in the trenches. It's got kind of this gray color palette to it, and that looks really good. Or where he meets Lando, it's in this, like, dirty underground place that has this, like, brown and yellow color to it, and that's great. That's where I would imagine you would meet someone like Lando. So, in some places it works, but in other places, you can't see a damn thing that's happening. Like the Kessel Run, if you ask me if I thought I wanted to see the Kessel Run in the movie, I'd say, no, that sounds stupid, but it's one of the most exciting, it's probably the most exciting portion in the film, and it's actually very fun to watch. The problem is there are times where it's hard to see anything, because the lighting is so bad. So, I guess that's as good a segue as any to go into the action. The action is really good in this film. It's a lot, like, smaller scale. So, I like the train heist, even though I will say it was very similar to a movie that came out just 4 months before, Maze Runner: The Death Cure, which came out 4 months before and opened with a train heist. But even involving, like, an aircraft carrier thing, pulling up a train cart full with whatever they're looking for. In The Death Cure, it was the kids that Wicked had kidnapped, and this one it was coaxium. That's what the substance, the really explosive substance that they look for, coaxium. But in this one, they lose the shipment and it explodes. And I know a lot of people thought that, like, oh, this is the shipment he drops when they're working for Jabba the Hutt. And I didn't think that. Even when I was watching the film, I'm like, no, they're not going to force that in just yet. Because I think this film was being planned, had a sequel planned, but they scrapped it after this movie bombed. Which I don't think is fair. I've seen people still asking for a sequel to Solo, which shows a lot more people like it than you were led to believe. A lot of people actually really like this film, and I do too, but never problem for a different day. So, and then we get the Kessel Run, which again is the most exciting portion of the film, and then we get like a James Bond style, like double cross with both the villain, Beckett, and Han. So yeah, I like that every action sequence has something new. The action sequences are never the same. Even the escape from, like, the prison on Kessel, it's different from the other action sequences. It's not just, like, a bland shootout. You also get to see Wookiees kick ass. You get to see all the characters working together and doing different stuff. Unfortunately, this reminded me of one thing that nobody likes in this film, and that's L3. I hate social justice bullshit being crammed into films, and I'm sick of Star Wars doing it. And this droid is the prime example of that. She's annoying as fuck. She gets a few good lines and gets a few good laughs every now and then, but her feminist or like droidist bullshit I got real sick of, and thank God they killed her. But this does lead to a really, really clever scene where she's basically plugged into the ship, and she becomes part of the ship, which is a callback to Empire Strikes Back, where C-3PO mentions that this ship has a weird type of language, like a different kind of language than most other ships. This is really clever, and I think the reason that this was brought up, and this was brought into the films, because this was written by Lawrence, or at least co-written by Lawrence Kasdan, who co-wrote Empire Strikes Back. So this guy clearly knows what he's doing, and this was really clever. I am legitimately shocked that they actually did something like this clever, and this is the kind of callbacks I like. Like, the callbacks in this aren't nearly as annoying as Rogue One. Like, in Rogue One, I remember one scene where they happened to bump into the two assholes from the cantina from Episode 4, and that was possibly the dumbest callback I've ever seen in my life. That was so stupid, and it didn't help the narrative, and it was just thrown in there as really bad fan service. Here, the fan service is actually really well done. Like, I like how they draw attention to the fact that Lando says Han's name wrong. Because you notice in Empire that Lando constantly says it wrong. And even Leia and 3PO start saying it wrong as well. I'm not sure why they started saying it that way in Empire. Maybe Irvin Kershner just had no idea how to pronounce it. Or maybe it was Billy D. Williams' fault, and then Fisher and Daniels just started going along with it. I don't know, because Luke was still saying it as Han instead of Han. But here they do it a really clever way, because at first it starts by Han pronouncing Sabak wrong, pronouncing it Tabak. And then later on, Lando calls him Han, and Han's like, it's Han, but that's okay. See, that's a creative callback. And then the stuff with L3 that I already mentioned. There's more callbacks like this, and then at the end of the film, they talk about a job from a gangster on Tatooine. And I'll give you 3 guesses as to who it is, and the first 2 don't count. Yeah, it's probably Jabba the Hutt. And I think they were saving that for a sequel. I have a feeling the second movie was going to open with him dropping the shipment that Jabba's so pissed at him about. And the movie also ends with a cameo by Darth Maul, who ends up running Crimson Dawn. I thought this was really cool, but that's only because I watched the animated shows. I have a feeling if you didn't watch the animated shows, this will be horribly confusing. Even with the metal legs, you will probably be horribly confused as to how he's alive and what the hell he's doing here. And even still, in Clone Wars, it doesn't explain how he got to this position. It shows him talking to, the leaders of Crimson Dawn, even to Paul Bettany's character. Why can't I think of this name? Give me a second. No, I got nothing. I'll put it in text down here when I eventually figure it out. So this probably was a really weird twist, and I don't think it was handled very well. And he ignites his lightsaber just to show it off, I guess, because it was pointless. And I do like it is the lightsaber he had from Rebels, so I do like that. But if you don't watch the animated shows, you're probably horribly confused by this, and I don't think it was really needed. But I would like to have seen a fight between Han and Maul. Maul would probably kick his ass, but that'd have been something I'd pay to see. And something else I want to mention about this film is that it has one of the best and the most underrated Star Wars soundtrack. This soundtrack is extremely well done. I am shocked at how good this soundtrack is, adapted. There are some themes that are adapted by John Williams, and I do like how, when it first... you know what, I'm not going to talk about that. That doesn't matter. But, yeah, I don't understand why so many people hate on this film. I get that some people probably thought it wasn't very nice. You know what else really bugs me? I heard people saying for years that they wanted a Han Solo movie. For years, they wanted a Han Solo film. But after the film came out, everyone started saying, who asked for this? You all did. Everybody, for years, was wanting a Han Solo film. And they finally get one, and now they're acting like they never wanted one. Make up your fucking mind. So yeah, I will never understand why so many people hate on this film. It's just a fun time, and it's one of my favorite Star Wars films. It's probably right below Empire and maybe below A New Hope. It's yeah, I like it that much. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about Solo. Next time, we're going to take a look into the wonderful world of musicals. Until next time, so yeah, I'll see y'all next time. Bye.